All right, all right. We are live. So give folks a few minutes to trickle in. I should have put the agenda as the screen just so at least we know what it is. But let's just give people a few minutes to trickle in. Then we can get started very soon. For some of you already started, the session's title is a panel discussion on building products and drive outcomes. Sorry, can everyone hear us okay?
Sounds great here.
All right, good. Let's get started. So I'm really excited to start this panel discussion, very timely, on how to build products and drive outcomes at scale with speed using strategic portfolio management. And I am Becky Flint, founder and CEO of Dragonboat. And on this panel, I'm going to read through the panel list. On this panel, we have 4 product portfolio experts and executives. Aaron Hall, VP of Portfolio and Project Management and Chief of Staff at Carfax. John Fields, VP of Product Management at Talogy. Christine Kenny, VP Product Management for Tela. And Gloria Ramchandani, SVP of Product Management of Capardo. So our topic today is something that most of us are thinking about. Moving with the speed at scale is challenging today, even more so with AI-powered world. Everything is much, much faster. So our topic really is around how we are going to compete and thrive in today's AI-powered world, and how that the strategic lens and portfolio management practice, aka strategic portfolio management, can be brought in and practiced and then deliver operate at scale, connecting strategy to delivery. So with that, I will start. So we have 3 key topics we are going to touch upon. With these 3 key topics, and if any of the audience have questions, please put it in the chat live so we can bring in if it makes sense. And panelists, as the question coming to you, please also provide a little bit intro of your background, just so that we have some context coming through. And for me, I will going through the tiles around on my window, and then we'll go reverse tile around just so that everyone get a chance. And please do chime in to help each others on the topics if something kind of spark additional conversation. So without further ado, let's start with the first question, which is around strategy, portfolio, and product management. And the question is this: what is your view on how strategy, portfolio management, product management intersect? How has that evolved in your organization? So I'm going to start with Christine first.
Yes, thank you, Becky. I'm so excited to be here. Kristen Kenny, VP of Product at Forteller, and Forteller, we are a consulting company. More so, how do we help other customers do this within their own organizations? In our background, we've got a lot of healthcare organizations, large enterprise, from early startups as well. And so kind of helping them really either transition or start from scratch to be highly innovative and highly, kind of collaborative in that environment. So, looking at that strategy, portfolio, and product work is really one system where, communicating that strategy, those outcomes that you're trying to accomplish at that portfolio level, like really understanding those priorities. And then at that product level, seeing how those things are, kind of put out into the world and the response to those things, and like how they might then adjust and change that strategy. Having those alignment across those things is really critical. And so for me, having tools like Dragonboat is really helpful and magical, and I've brought it into several clients. That ability to see this all in one place and have that communication where it's not just one point in time of communication, but people can see it and can come in and see how it's evolving continuously, is something that really, I think, adapts what we're seeing and letting people move faster. So, traditionally companies had more of like a top-down approach, very heavy planning cycles, and they would kind of be pushed out then throughout the organization. And so with, the evolution of technology and AI that is, giving us more of that speed and adaptability, we really need to be relying on our teams to be moving quickly and autonomously, but knowing that, everybody's moving in that right direction together, without that kind of heavy like governance burden that used to kind of exist. And so these tools kind of help to marry all of those things together.
Right, really good point. Especially, in the earlier session, we talked about strategy. We also heard about strategy needs to be front and center versus say it once and forget. So connecting things definitely makes a huge difference. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Diana's session was the one that preceded this one, and she was sort of laying out the different kinds of strategy, I was just nodding and smiling, where it's like business strategy needs to drive the product strategy, which then drives both the portfolio management and product management. And so a lot of times, I've seen challenges in different companies where when the business strategy is a little bit hazy, product management will try to step in and do those things, but then it's one where it's like you're never really aligned with the rest of the business. And so I think it's one of the things that you really have to work with your executive team and your board to make sure that you've got that business strategy, product strategy set, which then really drives the rest of them. And for me, it's one where I think the efficiency and consistency are key. And this has been sort of one of the things that's evolved with us over time. It's that, back when we were first getting our feet under us, I wouldn't be really strict to say, okay, look, if some of your ideas are in Confluence and others are in this deck in SharePoint and others are over here, that was okay. Where it's like, as long as we're doing the thinking, I was very comfortable with being a little bit flexible there. As we have continued to grow, and I'm realizing now that I kind of skipped over my intro, so I'll get back to that in a second. I realized like we have got to be much more consistent with it. So I am John. I am the VP of product here at Talogy. We're private equity owned. We're in about 25 different countries, and we have 18 platforms within our portfolio. And so, if we have all of these different insights and different systems, and the strategy documents are over here, and the roadmap is over there, and the backlogs are over there, it just gets to where it's very difficult to manage. And what happens is that then it drives up the communication burden across your team, because now they're copying and pasting things and putting links in and this and that, and it makes you less efficient. So this has definitely been a journey for us where we've kind of been evolving from what I would call qualitative alignment, which is if I can sit down with a product manager and they can explain to me, here's what we're working on, here's how it maps to the strategy, that's great. But what I'm really trying to move us towards is quantitative alignment, where it's easier to have dashboard roll-ups where you can start to see more clearly how these things are impacting. But that's one where Radhika's session from earlier today was really interesting for me, right? Where it's not going too far in that OKR quantitative driven environment, but thinking about, how we can balance the quantitative with the qualitative.
Yeah, really, really good insight on that. It's true, right? So it's always a balance of the strategy and execution and teams and also alignment and data, no data. It's definitely the balancing part of the portfolio management. Great insight. So Gloria, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I'm Gloria, SVP of product here at Capato. We are a insight portfolio company. I started here when we were just, 4 million in revenue with 2 people in the product org, and we've now scaled to a product organization that's over 120 people across multiple geographies. I think at Capato, our journey has been interesting because we have grown from a startup. We've acquired companies that are now integrated into our portfolio. And similar to what John was saying, I think I would say there is a challenge once you scale as a product organization to really be thinking about how your business strategy is also going to drive your product strategy. And I think even further, product strategy and operations, right? We see that title a lot these days, that was a new function that we actually created within our product organization once we started achieving scale. And so for me, what's been very interesting is teaching our product managers how to connect the dots. And with disparate systems and everything being everywhere, how do you quantify, your feature request or what's going in your next PI planning back to the business goals that you have and what you want to achieve for that year. And so I think that concept of strategy and ops is we're seeing that over and over again. I think it's a function that everyone should be investing in and really connecting those dots.
That is just so cool. I think it's really very fitting goes to Aaron because you mentioned the strategy and ops. So Aaron, what do you think?
Sure. Hey, welcome. It's good to be here with everybody today. As Becky said earlier, I lead our portfolio and project management function for Carfax. That's with an F, not an M, by the way. We are the world's leading provider of vehicle history data, whether that's to consumers, dealers, service shops, banks, insurance companies, law enforcement, and so on. And we do that in the US, Canada, Europe, and Mexico. Really a wonderful place to work, but also very complex. As I think about these three things, Becky: strategy, portfolio management, and product management, I'm reminded of what's a pretty tired metaphor, right? The three-legged stool. But I really do think of these as three legs on a stool. And I don't know about your all's experience. Mine in multiple organizations is that most organizations tend to focus just on two of them, for one reason or another, right? They've got somebody who's really fired up about strategy or really fired up about product, but they don't have all three and figure out how to balance three of them together. And I think that's a real gap or a challenge, because without all three, strategic portfolio management is really destined to fail, or at best kind of suboptimize. I love John's insights on the cascading strategies, right? I think it's very, very important for them to be integrated. And Gloria, your point about operational strategy too, right? That's critical. And I think a lot of times we're thinking about the big and the bold as we think about product vision and business strategy, and sometimes it's not as exciting, but you got to run the organization and the platform and the products as well. For us, Dragonboat has been just a great enabler. It's really been part of a multifaceted pivot for us across all three of these areas. If you could see the details of the Carfax playbook behind me, you'd see a big part of our culture is transparency. The transparency, from the individual team members up to the C-suite, enabling data-driven decision-making, scenario planning, things like that. I mean, they've just really materially increased all of our efforts, right, as we head down the SPM journey. And I think that's my final thought. Gloria and John both use the term journey, and I think it is too. I'm not sure you ever get there. I think you got to be at peace with that, right? We're on a journey to try to do this, and I'm not sure it ever ends. Sorry, folks, if you're looking for the key to when we get there.
Yeah, I think you're really right, because the world's changing, right? It's if the world stays still, then we probably could get there because the world's moving. So we really have to evolve with that. And you mentioned a couple of things. I think it's really fitting. I'm going to take an audience question to you as well, which is like, that's what we say, right? The data and the transparency is so critical today because everyone making decision has such a full stack implication, not just you make a decision with this piece of data, you go with it, right? So that's just today's world, AI or not, needs that. The other part I would really highlight is sort of the strategy connection between strategy and execution, right? Without execution, it's just a dream. So, right, but obviously if you have execution without the strategy, is probably a nightmare. Either case, you don't want it. So with that, there's a question for you, Aaron, which is around, audience probably see you in the military background. So what is the difference, you would say, analogy between military and a business strategy?
Well, how long do we have, Becky?
1 minute.
1 minute. Oh my gosh. Look, I think one of the things that the military, and my background is in the Army, but I think there are similar vehicles in all the services, at least in the U.S. Like in the U.S. military, when we take on an operation, we articulate what we're doing and why and with whom and what's called an operations order. There's a very clear strategy, what we call a commander's intent, right? Which in a normal like product or project delivery context, we would call the scope. We would encapsulate that in a charter. We'd share it with everyone to make sure everyone knew the what and the why. In the military, we do it in case the person in charge, well, is incapacitated. Let's say that we don't have that problem in most cases, in a commercial environment here, but the same idea is there, right? Clear vision, clear intent. I think a lot of folks think they're fundamentally different environments, and the reality is they're not. We're made up of the same people. We have missions, we have goals, we have values and cultures. I think there's a lot more in common between a military and a commercial or civilian environment than a lot of people think.
Right. Really, 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 really good insight. Very fun as well. So with that, we move to the second question. Great context on strategy, portfolio, delivery, team, data. Now, how has it evolved, especially in today? With AI, with everything moving faster, how's the team and leader, product and decisions, investment are evolving? So with that, I will probably go to you, Gloria, first.
Yeah,
And followed by Aaron.
Thanks, Becky. So I like to think in terms of a value stream map and value stream mapping concepts. And if we think about how you actually go in and build a product, starting from planning through develop and build through test and release, I believe the biggest opportunity that we have with AI today is cutting down the time with discovery. I remember years ago when you would have to be on site with a customer, talking to them with no recording devices, taking notes by hand, not typing, and how labor intensive that process was to actually conduct discovery, to understand your persona, the use cases, who you're building your product for. And I believe with AI, we now have the benefit of recording features. We have the benefit of transcripts. We have the benefit of translating that down into a deeper level of detail to help us then create our feature requests. So I think the biggest impact we're going to see with AI is cutting down the time for discovery. I also believe that AI is reshaping how our product managers can make decisions by giving them more real-time visibility into customer behavior and that data around adoption. So that's the shift that I see. And I think what we're actually going to notice in the next few years is efficiency. We're going to see much more efficiency with the development teams and business analysts and product managers. And the functions that are post-release, like your marketing teams, are not going to keep up with the innovation that you're delivering because you're going to be able to go 10x at the speed that you were historically. And so it's really interesting, in my opinion, kind of where we're headed with AI. And I actually see the outputs, being exponential with AI.
That's
Yeah,
really, really good call out. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
I was just saying, great points all. And by my count, it took us about 16 minutes to start talking about AI. That's a record because normally it's in the first 5 or 10 minutes, if that, right? I think for us, or as I think about AI and how we do what we do, I think, we all got to get over our fear of AI replacing us, sucking all the power in, and why we're building all these data centers and all that jazz, and stop asking ChatGPT silly things, which we know we all do, right? I think once we do that, right, we really will start to leverage all of the data that's housed inside our environments, our organizations, as well as what's available sort of publicly to the LLMs and the various capabilities. I mean, you all, Dragonboat has got some wonderful capabilities, the project assistant, planning assistant, portfolio advisor in particular, that we're really psyched about. I think, for us, we talk a lot about our data being Gen AI ready. You think about, like what I said earlier, Carfax is a data organization, right? We want to make sure that all of our data, that what is business related about vehicles, customers, et cetera, but also our internal business data is really able to be leveraged as well. I thought I mentioned Microsoft actually hosted a great session last week where they pulled a bunch of smaller firms and VCs from across the world actually together to really talk about some opportunities. And I love how a big company like Microsoft, who's actually doing some great things, I mean, it's really impressive, it kind of recognizes they can't do it all and they want to help some smaller firms sort of move along as well. So those are a few thoughts from our perspective.
Very, very cool. What do you think, John?
It's a great question, and sort of the two areas when I think about it from a portfolio level that I see is one, I think about trying to run at a portfolio level 15 years ago without industry analysts, right? And industry analysts, companies like Gartner and things like that were just instrumental in understanding what's going on the macro side of things and how are things changing across industries and things like that, and being able to use certain AIs. I mean, I love Perplexity and Claude for things like this, of being able to understand how industries are changing, and then looking at my value props and where do my value props line up and where are they shifting on me in ways that I'm not expecting. I can have that happen now with AI in what would have taken thousands of dollars and months to be able to pull off with a combination of in-house and external folks. And so that's one of the areas that I love to use AI. And then it's one of the things that Gloria said, and Aaron didn't get to it, but it was in his notes earlier that I really liked, was that both of them talked about investments. And so as I'm looking at the portfolio level, I very much think about my roadmaps as investment portfolios. I think about having a fund manager kind of approach, where it's like, if I'm going to deliver certain results, where am I going to put my money across those different funds? And so I take inspiration sort of from our finance brethren that look similarly. And AI can really help in that area by saying, well, if you tweak and go up in, investing in this part of your portfolio, what are the ramifications of that likely to be? Is that after you work with it and you kind of get it to where you've trained it a little bit, it does a really good job with some of those hypotheses.
Right, really cool. And Christine, you've seen a lot of customers and audience outside, so would love to hear what you've seen and trends.
Yes, and definitely this is one of those topics where we get a lot of questions and feedbacks around, this cycle. And I really want to kind of play off of what Gloria said, where, they're like, what steps in this process can you eliminate? And I think the answer to that is, we don't eliminate any of those, kind of process steps. They're really critical and important, but we can move so much faster through those steps in so many different ways. And that is really helpful. And I think kind of looking at then the product itself and kind of how we build that alignment between, product and technology is needing to become even tighter with AI. So as things are kind of, really, really picking up, and we're moving beyond kind of those, very initial, ways to kind of embed AI into existing products, and shifting that into really how we build what we're going to build in a way that's like very different. We've got to be a lot tighter integrated with our technology partners, because there's a lot of exploration that needs to happen between the product side, what we're trying to accomplish, what it is that we want to do, and the reality of the technology at the moment. It's shifting and changing so quickly. And so there's a lot of promises, and so some of those are kind of future truths, and some of those things are very much here and real now. So having that kind of tight alignment earlier and often is also really critical to make sure that AI is done with that strategy in mind, in a very, kind of deliberate way, that makes sure that it's leveraged in that company in a very thoughtful, secure, and ethical way. And I think that, kind of holistic kind of view of it is something that we're seeing a lot of companies kind of shift to right now.
Right. Right. It's really cool to hear you all go through. I think kind of like a transition naturally to the next question. What I'm hearing is this: the best practice will not go away, regardless of market research, user understanding and then prioritization and measuring outcome. It just gets faster. So then we have a new bottlenecks, right? So the bottlenecks years ago was engineering resources, maybe still with maybe something else. So ultimately, like, how do we see the new challenges? What are some of the hardest challenges in your organization phase in managing portfolio and product at scale? And then also with the evolving landscape and things, how these are changing, how you're solving them. So I'll go back to you, Aaron, for this one first.
Well, the first, I think, hardest thing is actually behind us. And John reminded me of this notion of an investment framework. I was talking with a company the other day that was considering moving forward with Dragonboat. And I said, guys, the one piece of advice I had for you, aside from go with Dragonboat, was take the time to determine what your investment framework is before you start using the tool, right? So critical. In fact, some of what you see, this is not virtual, by the way, this is a real background. Some of what you see behind me are some remnants of investment framework development activities that we had. So that was a real challenge for us. Now that we have that and we're operating, I would say a couple of things. We had a great moment. We do a quarterly senior leadership meeting at Carfax, and our CEO stood in front of the top leaders in the company in January and said, everyone needs to get used to hearing no. And everyone looked at each other and nodded, which I thought was funny because you're thinking about no and everyone's nodding. I'm like, clearly they're not getting it. Something is amiss here. And I have found that out, right? Even when people are expecting to hear no, when they themselves hear no, it's not good to them, right? Personally. So working through that in the right way with the right people and so on, I think has been a challenge for us. You may have heard this phrase, no one's baby is ugly. Like we really have struggled with that, particularly when we have 6 kind of tenants, if you will, within our investment framework. And oftentimes we have to do, I hate to call it a trade-off because it sounds very tactical, but, we look at investment levels across them. And we get into that, and I say all that. Look, I'm Switzerland here. I don't care I don't even care if you have a baby. I'm just here to get the people in the room and have data-driven decisions and so on. That's been a little tricky for us. Occasionally, we'll run into, we all want the business to grow, right? And we want it to grow in leaps and bounds by innovating. We want it to grow incrementally with, evolutionary product investment. But we've got a technology strategy. We've got to do some cyber work to keep the bad guys out. So we sometimes will balance and struggle to balance, frankly, our investment across those 2 different types of work. And I'm some of you, I don't know if you have children or not, but I'm reflecting on when my kids would go at the arcade and they'd play this whack-a-mole game. And I've got folks on my team who laugh every time I pull what's left of my hair out, because it's inevitable that these projects crop up that are not tied to our investment framework clearly, and they happen. And I don't know how they get through. Sometimes I catch them and we're 2 months into them. Where did this come from? What's happening? We call them the other projects, and other is a 4-letter word here at Carfax. So I'm forever chasing those things down.
Very, very fun. Gloria, what's your thought on that? You saw you smiling.
I'm just laughing, Aaron, because we had a scenario this morning where there was a feature being shipped to production that I had no idea about. So I think teams get excited to innovate and build and want to deliver above and beyond, right? They want to over deliver. And I believe when we think about and we take a step back to really think about Becky's question, which is, what are the challenges that you face when you're delivering and managing products at scale? Products at scale are very different from a product that you're delivering to 2 to 3 customers, right? And so as you think about achieving scale, it's who's the persona? What is the use case? Is it just a cool piece of technology that doesn't have a persona and use case? If that's the case, then no, it's not ready to be shipped, right? And so I think we have to, in our minds, really separate from trying to be innovative, building really cool things, but also keeping the customer at the center, understanding who you're building that feature for. Is there value in that? And to Aaron's point, I mean, these other secret projects that take place that have nothing to do with your business strategy, trying to get those back on the rails so that it can tie back to your business strategy. And so I think that's the hardest thing for me as a leader is not disappointing the team. I don't want to continue to say, hey, we're not going to use this, this innovation, but how do we rethink that? I want you to continue to innovate, but let's keep the customer at the center.
Right.
Yeah. When I was at a younger startup that had maybe a little bit more of a sense of humor, instead of closing a backlog item, I had the Museum of Good Ideas. And we can always take a feature request and put it in the Museum of Good Ideas. We can go and look at it and say how awesome it is. And then we can bring it back out of the Museum of Good Ideas if at some point, but it wasn't one where everybody felt like I was saying no to their idea, is I was just putting it in the museum. That's all I was doing.
I
And
love it.
I see Aaron
That's
is
so
adding that to
fun.
his
That's
museum of
very
good
fun.
ideas. But I think, you know, when you crack a whip, right? The motion that you do to start the crack is a small motion, but by the time you get to the end of the whip, right, it is moving very, very quickly. And so if I go back to the question that's asked about what's the hardest challenge that it faces, is appreciating that as I start to crack that whip, the people who are delivering these values and the strategy changes, they're going to feel like they're moving very quickly, that they're, you know, that it feels out of control at their end. And so part of what I would tell you that I'm trying to do to approach these challenges is, instead of driving directives, be able to approach it from a posture of curiosity, right? What if we moved our strategy from here to here as I'm seeing what's going on in the market? What would be the impact of that? And being able to have those conversations, not just across the product team, but then growing into the engineering team, so that we don't create this environment where it's like, just because my research can move 2 months faster than it used to be able to, doesn't mean that I can have the product teams pivoting every time that happens. So really trying to figure out, how do you balance that and damper that in the organization, I think is one of the things that's important.
That's very cool. I think that's fitting right into what you like to share a little bit more, Christine.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point, and I love that museum concept. I might have to take that one to some of my teams. And I think for us, probably one of the most prevalent things that I see people struggle with is this push and pull between, you know, kind of speed and governance. So, you know, AI does allow for this speed, but especially for, you know, really large organizations, that governance, particularly ones that, you know, have been around for a while, is such a strong muscle that they have, and like finding ways to, you know, kind of shift that traditional model of like very, you know, kind of heavy stage gates, a lot of process, a lot of communication via PowerPoint, and looking at how you really kind of speed up that communication. So, you know, again, tools like Dragonboat are critical to that, and also having people see what's happening across like that portfolio level and those other, you know, kind of portfolios, so that people aren't, you know, kind of doing things that aren't kind of in alignment, makes sense. And then using AI to also improve those internal processes to speed up that communication and that transparency. I think that's a large component of it as well, because, you know, there does need to be that governance that is still there to ensure that you don't have the other projects that John called them. But, you know, how do you make that keep up with the pace of the teams and not be a heavy manual effort? And some of the AI agents that have been created are allowing for a lot of improvements for the way that we work and communicate to even get better with the transparency that we have today.
Yeah, I think you said something very interesting. I think several of you actually touched upon where's the observation we had. You know, in the end, it's the outcome. So regardless of whatever one component of the speed is fast, your fastest path to outcome is the slowest part of your whole operating model. So identify the slowest part and be able to, you know, like regardless of communication or governance or others, I think that's really, really critical. We hear a lot about that. The other part, I think, you know, one of our, you know, customers shared that for them, they're in the banking industry, to launch something very large, not only just product engineering, there's compliance, the security, all the other stuff. So bring them on the same boat, example, being able to see what's going on and make adjustment and alignment along the way has really been something important to them as well, to being able to bring a product to market much, much faster, because governance is needed. However, the traditional way of having the other side of people doing their security, compliance, and product here is not going to work. You really have to bring everyone on the same page. So this is some of the tips that I heard. It was really good. And obviously the museum and others that I learned a lot. So if we were to say, what are some of the lessons or tips you have learned, or your organization or others, that you think that the audience can take away, can bring home? So maybe we'll start with you, John, the museum, and then what's the others?
It sounds great. So for me, it really does. When you're thinking about it at a portfolio level, you sort of have to think about different seasons of investment, right? So the same way that, you would think about, are you investing in large cap stocks, small cap, international, domestic, like all of those kinds of things. I use portfolio management to think about, am I investing in thought leadership? Am I aligned with my target user? Am I getting my tech debt done? Am I doing all those things? So not only do you think about how am I doing it for this quarter, but then you start thinking about in different quarters, how do things kind of go back and forth and how do you tweak that over time? And maybe you have like an upcoming user group meeting, so you need to invest more in innovation prior to that so that you've got a great thing to show in the keynote. And so I think that would probably be the first, is really around how do you think about investing in those key areas over time. And then the last I would tell you is don't make the same mistake I did, where I was too lax on putting too many things in too many systems at first. And so I would definitely recommend, like, be strict on, I want everything in this system, and Dragonboat's been a great partner for that, of helping us get all of that together. And so making sure that you're strict on that at first, because then as you grow and scale, then you don't have the problem that says, oh, it's all over the place and it feels unmanageable, and now I have to focus on bringing it back together.
That's really cool. Thank you. And that's one of the things we heard a lot, is to say, like, the 5 blind people and touching the elephant. You're all right, but you're incomplete, therefore not correct. So
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a good way to go through. So Christine, what's your thought on this lessons learned, and others may learn from you?
Yeah, I think kind of teeing off of, what John was talking about as far as like getting everybody into one tool. It's amazing how many customers that I work with that don't have that capability, and are using, everybody's on their own thing. Like somebody's on an Excel sheet, somebody's in PowerPoint, somebody might be on a tool that they have, and kind of having them all in one space. And to just kind of layer on to that a little bit further, also ensuring that everybody is speaking the same language. And so, with tools like Dragonboat that are configurable, and you can, kind of make these like initiatives, epics, user stories, themes, you can kind of name them different things. In my experience, product management is done just a little bit differently at every company. So ensuring that like everybody is speaking the same language when they are kind of laying out this plan, so that the leveling is consistent when you're looking at it, kind of holistically, or other people are kind of jumping in and out of different portfolios to kind of understand what different folks are working on. So I think those things, and then pushing that communication and understanding beyond that product department as well, to make sure that communication is clear and understood. And I think particularly with the age of AI, that communication beyond product has always been really important, and it's even more so really important because, as just regular people in the world, we're all hearing so much about AI every single day, and so everybody has their own, interpretation of what that means. And so it's really, really important to be able to communicate like how with your company, what it means to you, how you were using it, and what that looks like, so that everybody else is kind of, again, on the same page and kind of thinking through those same things. And then the other thing that I would say is it's really promising, to kind of have AI have this notion of speed. And it's good to want, oh, great, we can accelerate this and we're going to move so much faster. It has to be intentional. And I think this kind of really tees off of something that Gloria said earlier around the product operations piece, and looking at when you're putting all of these different tools in place and you're changing how these things are working, like what is that operational impact and change, and doing that at a company level. So it's not, kind of everybody figuring it out on their own. How does it shift the way teams work together? How does it shift the way we work with design, the way we work with development, and making it very intentional and clear. And then the last little thing is just age-old wisdom. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. That's, I think, probably the biggest thing with AI. We are exploring every single day. There's not a single day that folks, me and my team, aren't trying something that's new. And there's sometimes that we try it just to figure out, okay, that doesn't work. Or it might be that that doesn't work in this step and we need to be a little bit more refined and then try it again. So really not letting that, kind of perfection, kind of stagnate what you're doing. Get in and try things, learn, change, and adapt. And that would be the big takeaway
Yeah.
for me.
Plus one on that. Better is the enemy of good enough. No doubt. No doubt. Let's get something going and let's iterate. If I think, Becky, about like some lessons that we've learned, I'm thinking about something that John said. It sort of reminded me, this art and science of portfolio management that I think that we do and many of your attendees today do is still like generally not familiar to a lot of business leaders, right? So I talk about my 401k a lot, like your investment profile. Like I'm an old dude, right? When I was 22, 25 years old, I was investing very differently than I am today. Companies go through those shifts, so hopefully not, down at the month or quarter level, but, over time, right? And so thinking about how we invest and trying to translate so it makes sense. If I think about when we started using Dragonboat, I honestly, I think, Becky, your team probably thought we were dragging our feet a little bit, right? Because our implementation started off with a rather small number of users. We made a very conscious decision to preload our investment framework, our product, project, tech strategy initiatives, and so on. And then, boy, did we jump in with both feet and probably some hands and knees and ears and all sorts of other things, right? And I think I remember one of your account managers going, what caused the hockey stick? And I'm like, well, we got to where we were comfortable because I knew straight away the transparency that's so important in our culture was going to take hold and people were going to just go wild. And they have. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's a little scary, but having a C-level executive who's comfortable enough with Dragonboat that they pull it up in a meeting, not me, I mean, it is a wonderful thing if you can get there. I think too, having a little bit of a battle cry or some sort of common theme that you can, whether it's about making conscious decisions that are data driven with right people around the table, or I'll tell you now, one of the things that bothers me, I mentioned this framework, right, which is a great thing for us. It's a great North Star, but when you have, if you've got 6 corporate objectives or strategic objectives that have 3 to 5 problems each and 10 to 12 projects or solutions to those, like you quickly lose focus because you splinter out so far, right? And so there's a danger there, just to be aware of. I think that maybe the last thing, actually one thing I will mention back to Benjamin's question about the military and civilian side, there's a great book back here on my bookshelf. Sorry, I didn't plan this. But it's called Hope is Not a Method. Retired General Gordon Sullivan wrote it. He was the chief of staff of the Army when I was a young lieutenant. And it is not like you're not going to get to an optimized portfolio by hoping you get there, right? It doesn't work when you're fighting a war. It doesn't work when you're trying to balance a portfolio. You've got to be deliberate about it. It doesn't just happen, right? You have to have the right people. And I am blessed to have some wonderfully passionate folks on my team helping us make this happen. You've got to have the processes, the tools, the strategy, right, that we talked about early on, and just a wee bit of patience. It doesn't happen overnight either, right? You got to make progress on this journey with all of those things together. Because like I said earlier, I don't think you actually ever get there. So you got to iterate and evolve.
Right. Totally. Love it. So Gloria, take away and then wrap it up.
Yeah, I think for me it's driving that focus for the team, right? And really truly being that buffer between the team and the executive team as you continue to shift priorities, right? Because that's always going to happen. You're going to have market pressures, but how do you provide that buffer for the team so that they can truly focus? I think for me, one of the biggest lessons and Kristen, this goes back to like age-old wisdom. It's not falling in love with the solution, but falling in love with the problem, right? And reminding product managers that customer needs do drive innovation, but not the solution itself and not the technology. And so that I think for me is like my biggest lesson learned that I want everyone to take away with is really focusing on the problem you're trying to solve.
Right. And this is a really, really cool and very insightful. We have lots of questions we can't answer, so maybe we'll follow up with you to answer offline. I do want to add one thing. That was one thing that we learned as I talking to some of the people across, the industries and customers, which is source of truth. There are many of them. It could be source of truth for customers, source of truth for work, source for truth for product investment is different. You don't want to look at the product investment as the tickets and the work because they don't create value. They're not tied to customers. Where product investments are product and the features, they do tie to customers. They do tie to your business goals. They do tie certain outcomes. So I really want to take away from here because we're talking about portfolio management. It's not the tradition, like the old school way of rolling up work. There's like old school ways of rolling up work and thinking that's portfolio management. Work's important, but in the end, the product investment is thinking about a product, thinking about a customer, think about a problem, think about a strategy, and that is what we believe is important because you look at it from a different lens. And that's I hope that's sort of the portfolio management at scale in the AI speed. Speed is it's a good way to wrap up the conversation. Thank you so much, Gloria, Christine, Aaron, and John for joining us, and look forward to hear more and learn more. And for those of you who have questions, please share with us, and then we can answer that offline as well. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.